Ian's Car.
And action, take two. And today we have a Land Rover Defender in the workshop. It's suffering from a wheel issue. The wheel's wobbling. I'll just show you there. Look at that. That's wonderful. That is. That's got way too much play in the wheel. So there's obviously a problem with the wheel bearing there. You can see that. Look. Yeah. Oh dear. That's not good, is it? Anyway, we've also noticed that it's got a swivel hub seal, which we'll be covering as we go along on the strip down. So without further ado, we'll get on a little bit, we'll do a bit of stripping down and we'll come back to you. Cool. Right, as you can see, we've got the wheel etc. off now. We're now just lifting the brake caliper out of the way. The brake caliper is located by these two bolts. These are multi-point 12 sockets, is 13mm, so they're quite awkward to get off if they're seized, but these ones luckily came out. So we'll just pop the caliper onto the bench, out of the way. There's the other bolt for the caliper, and prior to that we took the trap rod end off there, which is there. Now that locates into the hub. The reason behind taking that off is it's got to come off anyway, but it necessitates ease to get the caliper bolts off. That's located with a washer and a castellated nut and a split pin that goes through and through a hole in there that locks that down so it doesn't come off. I've also taken the circlip and washer from there. Now that washer is very critical because it sets the free play up on that CV joint that comes through. Anyway, okay, well you can see we're at this stage now. We've removed the other steering damper, that's the steering damper. We did the trap rod end before, the same principle basically. Now we've removed the splined drive flange. Now this connects to the CV. You can see that moving in and out of there, which it's supposed to do, and that locks up the hub for the four-wheel drive. But what we're going to be looking at, and what looks very interesting there, is this wheel bearing. All this gunge and grease and everything seems to be a trace of oil there as well, actually, which isn't a good thing because that indicates there's some seals leaking in the axle. So anyway, we'll carry on stripping, and we'll get to the bottom of it and see what we got. Anyway, right, okay, you can see that part of the problem is this is a part of the bearing race that's collapsed, and the bearing's now bringing it to fall to pieces. But what also we've noticed is somebody's been at this before. There's distinct marks of chisel marks, which are here and here, as you can see, and here, where they've undone it and then done it back up with a chisel, because they haven't had one of these, which is a specific 52mm socket that goes over there. We now can't get that socket on, so we're going to have to do a little bit of work to try and get rid of those burry bits to get this socket back on. So we'll crack on with that for a minute, and then we'll come back to you when we've got this socket fitting properly. Right, well we're back after quite a considerable break of struggling with things. Unfortunately, we had to resort into removing this nut with a hammer and chisel because we couldn't get our socket on. It's not ideal, you know. The proper way is obviously using the socket, but as you can see here, you know, quite clearly there's a shard of metal there that could come off, and if you were tightening that up and it popped inside there in the greased area when you were doing it, you may not see that, and that may even get into the bearing and create all sorts of hassles. Anyway, that was our problem getting that off. We then realised we had an issue with the stub axle. The outer bearing and inner race, if I get that correct, had actually spun on this area here and had semi-welded itself to the stub axle. So we had to get a puller. Now we've got the hub assembly on the bench, so I'll just go across to the bench and then I can explain what we had to do. So okay, that's the nut that was dealt with. We then had to put this hub puller on to pull the hub off, which is located on some of the wheel studs, and it locates on the centre shaft of the stud. There wasn't a whole great of pressure on there, but it was enough to give us a problem getting it off, but it was just as well that we had that puller on hand ready to go. Now, this is what the problem actually was. You can see that area there where it's all scored and horrible. That was where it semi-welded itself to the stub axle. So that was why we had to get the puller in to pull that off. You know, now we're looking at potentially at this stage a wheel bearing kit. We're now looking at obviously a stub axle assembly, which is there, and that bolts onto there. We'll explain that in a bit more detail when we get it stripped off in a minute. What else we're going to find, I don't know. I think the swivel ball looks okay. I don't think there's anything really bad there. But again, until we get it all stripped out, we won't exactly understand what we've got to do and what we've got to replace, etc. Oh, here we are again. Right. Now we're getting to the bottom of this saga about the Defender wheel bearing that collapsed. We're going to give you a very brief description of what happened and what we're going to do, so it gives you an idea on how we're going to replace everything, and we'll go through that as we rebuild. Anyway, the first thing we came to was we realised the hub bearing had collapsed, and this is the stub axle that's been removed from the axle. And you can see the outer bearing has collapsed. That in turn welded itself to that, so it made it very difficult to get that apart. And the reason behind that, why that went wrong, is somebody at some point has put the grease seal in the wrong way. This seal is in the wrong way. So the sealing surface isn't really effective, and it's caused water to come in to the hub assembly and consequently just destroy it all and cause all this damage that you see here. This is also evident because we can see that somebody's been at it. They've been messing about, and look, they've tried to undo things and do things up with a chisel. You know, instead of, you know, splashing out a few quid on a new socket, no, they've done it that way. So it obviously tells you that whoever did it wasn't really concerned about a quality kind of job, which is what we're trying to do. So that was that problem. That in turn also damaged the inner bearing here that sits in that hub. It damaged the hub, and you can see that all that lot's completely ground out inside where that's been spinning. And this is what we're talking about. This is what a new hub should look like, a lovely shiny perfectly machined surface to accept a new bearing into. So that part is redundant. This stub axle is redundant. That's all scrap. And also what we did have on the actual swivel housing itself, there's a big seal that goes on the back there that seals, it's on here actually, it goes on there, and it helps to seal this swivel ball housing when it's actually situated into it like that. Again, we'll explain in more detail when we do an assembly. You can see from the pitting and damage on here, in this area here, that that's the reason we're changing this, because if you were to put a new seal on that, it wouldn't last 5 minutes. All those sharp, nasty burrs and pits on there would just cut the seal to pieces, and you'd end up with a lovely leaky mess like you've got on the back of this one here. So that in turn, this is a saga, this is, caused a water ingress into the CV, and you can see this is all gone sloppy and horrible, and it's all gone seized and solid. So that also is got to be changed. You can see inside there all the rust, and look, just wipe that and look at the mess that's coming out of there. So what we've got, and also the top swivel bearing, we found that had collapsed as well. So again, you know, that's through water. So what's happened here, we've had a problem with water getting in and seals, and also bad workmanship that's done by somebody else in the previous history of the vehicle. There you go, that's the difference. Nice CV, that's all lovely. That's horrible, rusty, contaminated with water. That's going in the bin. So, yeah, without further ado, we'll take a bit of a break. We'll get a chance to finish with tea. We'll organise ourselves, come back, and we'll start showing you the assembly process and all the new parts that are going into the rebuild on this vehicle.